After e4, c5, knight f3, d6, you play bishop b5, check. And in this video, we're going to go through some stuff we haven't seen in the previous videos, so we can close the Moscow saga once for all. After bishop b7, you take. Now, let's look at two options, queen takes or knight takes. We have seen both of them a lot, but we have to see some stuff we haven't seen already. So, queen to d7 now. Let's start with this. And now c4, as we all know from the previous videos. What about the early queen g4 move? This is a fork, and it attacks two pawns. So what to do here? You need to prioritize development. So castle, give up the central pawn. It's fine. Now you play d4. Obviously, this cannot be taken by the queen because of the knight. So black will have to take with the pawn. If black doesn't, we're just gonna carry on with development. And every move we make will come with a threat. Rook e1 comes with a threat. Knight c3 comes with a threat. So let's say black plays knight c6. You immediately play d5, and then the knight will have to move again, and that's going to be a massive problem. Because then the square c6 is controlled by a white pawn, and when we make a check, and you're going to see the theme I'm talking about now, when we make that check, it's going to be huge trouble for black. Let's make an example. After d5, now what about knight b4, threatening to go to c2? Here, that's also the right move, even in this case, even when it looks like, you know, the knight's defended, the knight is threatening to go to c2. You make a check. The only way to block is king moves. And now you play bishop to d2. And black is in huge trouble. That knight is really stupid there. You're going to go on with more tempo moves. Obviously, queen c4 is not possible because then the knight will be pinned and you can attack it with the pawn. Knight to c2, now going to trap the rook, but then you play bishop check. And then your queen is infiltrating and it's going to be checkmate soon. If black blocks, then that doesn't work, right? Because you can just take the pawn. The pawn in a7 is pinned. So back in this position, let's look at this move. Pawn takes in d4. Seems to be making sense. Fine. Just take back. And now it looks like, you know, it's kind of calmed down. However, it's not. We're about to start the fire here. No moves here work. Let's make an example. Okay, I'm going to give 3 examples. g6 to develop the bishop from the fianchetto, also because from this diagonal the bishop is kind of hopeless. e5 to attack the knight, and simply knight f6, developing move. And also knight c6. Right, so let's make a brief mention. Knight c6 will go through the same patterns that we're about to explore, so let's just quickly mention it now. You play knight b5, and that's it. You're threatening knight c7, check, winning the rook. And you're also threatening knight takes d6, check. The pawn will take, because obviously the knight's attacking the queen, so the pawn takes, and then you can pin the queen to the king, right? So you're winning this game easily. So let's not go through that now. Let's see another instance in which that occurs. g6. If black plays g6 now to develop from the fianchetto, seems to be making sense. But now black is going to be punished for using the queen early again and getting greedy. Knight to c3. There's nowhere to go for the queen on this diagonal. Nowhere else that makes sense. So let's say queen to e5. Because what else? Okay, queen to h4 as well. But we're going to play the same type of move. You will see. Queen e5. What's the move? Knight db5, and that's it. We're threatening the same stuff. Knight to c7. This is unstoppable. I mean, our opponent can play knight a6 to stop the check, winning the rook. But now rook e1, position evaluated +5, by the way, not for coincidence. Wherever the queen goes, it doesn't really matter, because then you're gonna be able to take this pawn. The pawn in e7 is pinned, and so the queen is giving extra support to that pawn. And the king is going to be checked. You're going to go to f7. It's a disaster, right? It's completely pointless to even look at this now. So back at the initial position. Here, g6 doesn't work. Knight c6 doesn't work. Well, let's look at e5. This comes with an attack on the knight. Okay, same stuff. Rook e1. And now, queen takes knight doesn't work, because you can just take the queen for free, right? The pawn in e5 is pinned. By the way, I can't make arrows today. I don't know, I'm trying to make an arrow now, it's just not working because I'm using the touchpad. I'm trying to click the right button. Oh, I did it finally. Anyway, it takes too much effort, so just listen to the squares. Rook e1, and now the queen will have to go. Queen g6 is the only square that seems to be making sense. But now knight to b5. And we're doing the same threat. Knight to a6. It seems like maybe things have changed now, because the queen's defending d6, the bishop's defending d6, and the knight's defending c7. So it looks like we don't really have a crashing move, although queen a4 wins the game on the spot. We're making too many threats here. Discover attacks, the double checks, blah blah blah, you name it. What to do? The knight can't even be removed from there, so we could easily just play moves like knight c3, knight d5, in case things get quiet. But let's say black plays knight c5 with an attack on the queen. Here you play knight to d6, it's a double check. And when the king moves, okay, can't go here, he might go, let's say, here, to d8. Or if he goes to e7, just check, right? And this ends the game. Because then you're entering the last rank with the rook. If king takes the knight, then you simply take this knight, and then the bishop's coming with a check, the knight is coming as well, and there's a checkmate coming very soon. I mean, look, king takes rook in order to equalize material, but now queen check in b5, king moves, bishop f4, then you're going to go to b7, win the rook, you take it from there. And back in this position, instead of king e7, what if king to d8? This seems more reasonable, but actually, I mean, it's worse, because check, the king moves, and when you reroute the knight, right, then you can take the rook. Yeah, I mean, it's a joke. Position evaluated +7. So in this position, once again, we've seen pretty much everything except knight to f6. This seems to be also to be a good move. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing to do. The game is compromised anyway. Knight c3, develop and attack the queen. Queen g6. So what to do now? After queen g6, queen to b3. And we're threatening to go to b7, and it's an easy game from there. There's nothing to do to stop this. b6, for instance, you play the usual knight b5. And you're threatening to go to c7. And you're threatening so many things. If you play knight a6, then queen a4 simply is a fork. You're attacking the knight, and you're threatening discover check. Deadly discover check, by the way. Instead, what about king to d8? Does it stop everything? No, because you play knight to a7. And that's gonna be it, because you're gonna go to b6. You know, it's yeah, checkmate very soon. If the rook takes the knight, you can take, and you're winning material. If the rook blocks, trying to save material, you obviously put more pressure on that rook. Knight to b5, finalizing the attack on the rook and winning the game. If black plays knight to e8, defending that rook, fine, still take, and obviously you got this now. Doesn't get any easier at this point. So let's look at something different now. Just a quick mention about something that I missed to say in one of the previous videos. So after bishop d7, take, c4. So in the more normal variation, the one with knight c6, we've seen a lot about this. Go and check the previous videos. You play d4, take, and now after knight f6, knight c3, g6, h3. We remember the reasons for these moves. It's all in the previous videos. So bishop e3. There's a line we didn't see here. After castle, rook ac8. Obviously play b3, a6, rook c1, and now we saw rook f to e8. The novelty is rook f to d8, which is there to put a little bit more defense over the d file, which is the one that our opponent cannot really push. It's the weakness. The d6 pawn is going to be the weakness. Queen to d3 comes now once again, and we know that knight b4 doesn't work, because then you can just retreat the queen and then play a3 later on. Let's look at this move that I encountered, b5. This is like a pawn sacrifice to open the files, which makes sense. Now here you need to take. And when the knight takes, then the black player will have two attackers on the pawn in b5. So what to do now? You take with the bishop. So now black recaptures. And what was the point here? You can take this pawn. Right? So the point of this defense, and this is something that a good player will be able to see, is that now black can win this pawn. So you take. However, after take, okay, queen to e7, and this is just completely winning for white. So that line, that move, don't be worried about this b5 pawn push. It's very popular. It happens a lot. I see it happening a lot against me, but you can neutralize it like that. Let's see something else now, so we can close this video. After d6 here, check. What about bishop blocks? And now bishop takes. What about when they take with the knight? Now we have seen this a lot as well, but there's just some clarification we need to make of stuff we haven't seen at all before we close. So c3. Now a couple of moves here. g6 or knight to f6 straight away. Let's start with g6. Right? Okay, d4, and now we have never seen this opening when they, this idea, when they take straight away. We've seen what happens when with bishop g7, rushing development. Now we just need to take back. So nothing special. Bishop g7, okay, castle, and it's very relatable to previous scenarios we've seen. So knight f6 now, e5. Already start an attack on that knight. Pawn takes, and now knight to g4 puts triple attack on this pawn. You cannot defend it with rook e1. What are you going to do? e6. That is the key move. And now you're obviously threatening to take this one, then you're threatening to make a discover check, then the queen will be winning the knight. We've seen these patterns in the past. So if the pawn takes instead, queen to a4, pins this knight and attacks this knight in g4. What to do here? There's nothing really to do. Well, the only move will be knight f6, kind of saves everything. But then knight to g5, threatening to go to e6 gloriously. Queen to b6, defend the pawn in e6. But it's just too late. Bishop e3 attacks the queen. The queen will have to move. Queen to d6 defends that pawn, prevents the arrival of the knight into an amazing square. Knight c3, development. And after castle, even if black had played h6 to attack the knight instead of castling, you can still play rook a to d1, right, with development. And now, if the queen moves away, let's say queen e5, right, to make an example, the best move is to just take this knight, right? You're winning material. If the queen stays in the protection of that knight, well, okay, if the queen goes to a6, looking for a trade, you take back. It's a bit surprising because now you don't winning material, but knight e6, and you're attacking the rook, and you also threatening to take that bishop position, completely winning for white. Rook f7, does it save everything for our opponent at the moment? Rook to d4, the idea of doubling up. Knight b6, removing itself from the pressure. Rook f to d1, doubling up. This is black trying to survive at their best of their possibility in a faulty variation, but nothing stops you. Now you're going to play rook d8, and it's an amazing position for white. So that was the line I needed to show because I didn't in the past. So in this position, after pawn takes and pawn takes back, we went through the immediate bishop g7. What about e5? How do we deal with this structure? Fine, you just castle, right? And after bishop g7, the difference here from the previous variation is the other opponent doesn't have a knight in f6. So we can take now, we do have to take, pawn takes back. What to do? It looks like black is kind of safe because now black can play knight f6 and he doesn't have to go through the problem of e5, white's push. Fine, queen e2. And after knight f6, rook to d1, pinning that knight. Queen e7, unpinning. It looks like a completely normal variation. However, b3. That is the key move to remember. Castle, and now bishop a3 is the winning move. You're skewing the queen and the rook, so you're going to have, if the queen takes, well, obviously the queen cannot take because the knight takes back, so you might ask, okay, well, knight to c5, what about this? Knight to c3. Rook f to d8, unpinning, preventing the future skewer. Knight to a4, putting more pressure on that knight. b6 is now forced because you got double attack on the knight. Take. Rook c1. Capitalizes on that pawn. Remember, you can also push b4 if the pawn is defended even further. This is black's most solid variation, which is why I kept it for the end of this saga. The pawn can indeed be defended, although it's a weakness that we have created, and you're gonna have to take it from here. But this is like black having played only stockfish moves all the way to here. So even if you get here, you still have an advantage. Knight d7 to protect that pawn. G3 is the best move. Rook to c8, maybe preparing to, in the future maybe push or maybe play knight b6 later on. Queen a6 with an attack on the rook, with an attack on this pawn. You're gonna have to work it out from here, exploiting the fact that these two pawns cannot defend each other. Position is only evaluated plus 150. This is the best we could get simply because our opponent played stockfish moves. So this is not likely to happen to you. The last variation, and then it's finally the end of the video, is the following. Bishop d7, take with the knight. c3. And now, knight to f6 straight away. Now, as we remember, we have to play queen e2. This is the only move at the moment. e6, the boring variation. How to deal with this? We have seen in the past we have to castle, and after bishop e7, d4. All normal. What about castle, right? When they don't take the pawn in d4, okay, e5 straight away. But even if the pawn takes in d4 and then you take back, you're gonna play e5 no matter what. Now, in the past, we went through knight d5 right now. Now we're gonna go through the novelty, which is when the pawn takes here. Okay, take back, and now the knight goes back to d5. This allows us to play c4 now. The knight will have to move again, let's say knight b4, knight c3 simply develops. And now, the knight back to c6, puts more attack over e5, puts the knight in a better square, and you defend it with the bishop. Knight to d4. We haven't seen this type of setup, this type of idea. Never happened before, so we're gonna look at this. It's kind of annoying. You don't want to give up your knight, but you have to. Pawn takes, and now knight to b5. Worst case scenario, I mean, you're attacking this pawn in d4, by the way, and this cannot be defended. Let's say if knight to b6 seems to be the only way for the queen to defend that pawn, but now rook f to d1 finalizes the attack on that pawn. If bishop to c5, trying to protect it, you just take, right? You're winning a crucial pawn. Bishop takes, but then bishop e3, right? That's pinned.